What happens when one of the most controversial royals sits down for what should be a straightforward television appearance, only for everything to spiral completely out of control? You won't believe what happens when Prince Harry faces Savannah Guthrie in one of the most explosive confrontations in morning television history. The tension was palpable from the first question, but no one could have predicted how dramatically the interview would implode. Before we dive in, make sure to hit that subscribe button and leave a comment below, because you won't believe what happens next. The studio lights blazed as Prince Harry settled into the familiar chair across from Savannah Guthrie on the Today Show set. What began as a promotional appearance for his latest charity initiative was about to turn into a masterclass in how quickly things can go sideways when two strong personalities clash. Cameras rolled, the audience watched, and neither host nor guest seemed ready for the verbal confrontation about to erupt. Guthrie, known for sharp questioning and refusing to let celebrities off easy, had clearly done her homework. Her research team had compiled a thick folder of talking points, and her posture made it clear she wasn't planning to throw Harry, meanwhile, appeared relaxed, but there was a defensive edge in his eyes that suggested he was bracing for impact. Prince Harry, thank you for joining us this morning, Guthrie began, her voice carrying the professional warmth. Seasoned journalists perfect over years of practice. You're here to talk about your Veterans Initiative, but I think our viewers would appreciate some candor about the ongoing tensions within the royal family. Harry's demeanor shifted immediately. His shoulders tensed, his jaw tightened, and his practiced media smile flickered for a moment. Well, Savannah, I'm actually here to discuss the important work we're doing for veterans who've served their countries with honor. I think that's what your viewers would really want to hear about. Guthrie wasn't having it. She leaned forward, journalist instincts kicking in. Of course, and we'll get to that. But you've been vocal about your family in recent months, and there are reports your relationship with your father and brother remains strained. Can you give us an update on where things stand? The studio seemed to drop several degrees in temperature. Harry maintained composure, but the flash of irritation on his face was clear. I think there's been enough said about family matters. What I'd prefer to focus on today is the veterans who need our support, not tabloid speculation. These aren't tabloid rumors, Prince Harry, Guthrie pressed, consulting her notes. These are statements you've made publicly, interviews you've given, books you've endorsed. You've been quite open about your grievances with the institution and family members. So, when you say there's been enough said, it seems like you've been doing most of the talking. Harry's carefully maintained composure cracked slightly. His hands, once resting casually, gripped the chair arms with tension. I think there's a difference between sharing one's truth and constantly relitigating family disputes on television. Your truth, Guthrie repeated, emphasizing the possessive pronoun. That's interesting, because from many people's perspective, it looks like you've been selective about which truths you share and when. You've painted yourself as the victim in numerous situations, but you've also profited significantly from that narrative. The accusation hung in the air. Harry's face flushed, and his voice hardened. I find it fascinating that speaking honestly about one's experiences is seen as profiting from Perhaps the real question is why the institution. I was born into resisted addressing legitimate concerns about treatment and support. Guthrie pressed on. But you didn't just address concerns privately. You went public, multiple interviews, a Netflix documentary, a tell-all memoir that isn't seeking resolution, building a brand around family dysfunction. Harry sat up straighter, his politeness beginning to crack. Building a brand. Is that what you think this is? You think I wanted to air family grievances publicly? That was my first choice. Honestly, yes, I do. Guthrie shot back without hesitation. Because when you strip away all the talk about seeking healing and understanding, what you've actually done is monetize family trauma. You've turned private family disputes into a very public and very profitable enterprise. The studio fell silent, except for the low hum of equipment and the distant murmur of crew members sensing that something unprecedented was unfolding. Harry's face went from flushed to pale, his eyes taking on a dangerous glint that suggested he was reaching his breaking point. You know what, Savannah? Harry said, his voice dropping to a level that felt more threatening than shouting. I came here in good faith to talk about veterans, about people who've sacrificed everything for their countries. But apparently, you're more interested in perpetuating the same toxic narratives that drove me and my wife out of that life in the first place. Guthrie didn't back down. If anything, she seemed energized by the confrontation. I'm interested in accountability. Prince Harry, you've made very serious allegations about racism, lack of support during mental health crises, and institutional failures. But when pressed for specifics, evidence, or context, you deflect. You hide behind vague statements about your truth while profiting from the controversy. The accusation hit like a physical blow. Harry's carefully constructed public persona was crumbling in real time, and viewers saw a man clearly at his limit. His voice, when he finally responded, was thick with barely controlled anger and something close to desperation. You want specifics? You want evidence? Harry's voice rose, his British accent becoming more pronounced as his emotional control slipped. How about the fact that when my wife was struggling with suicidal thoughts, the institution's response was to worry about how it would look in the press? How about the fact that legitimate concerns about press harassment were dismissed because addressing them might inconvenience certain people? Guthrie pushed harder. Again, you're speaking in vague terms. The institution said this. The institution did that. You're talking about your family. Prince Harry, your father, your brother, your grandmother, who just passed away. Are you saying they personally failed to support you and your wife during a mental health crisis? The question hit Harry like a direct blow to the solar plexus. His face passed through shock, pain, and rage before settling into something dangerously close to hatred. The mention of his late grandmother had crossed a line he hadn't expected Guthrie to touch. How dare you? Harry whispered, so low, the studio microphones barely picked it up. How dare you bring my grandmother into this? She was the one person in that system who showed genuine care and concern. Guthrie leaned in. But that's not what you've implied in your public statements, is it? You've suggested the entire royal system, including your grandmother as its head, was complicit in the treatment you and Meghan received. You can't have it both ways. Prince Harry, either the system failed you, including her leadership, or your grievances are more selective than you've led people to believe. Harry walked straight into the logic trap. His hands shook with barely contained fury, his voice sharp and cutting, making several crew members visibly uncomfortable. My grandmother was trapped in that system, just like the rest of us. She did what she could within impossible constraints. Impossible constraints? Guthrie pounced. She was the Queen of England, Prince Harry. She had more power and influence than almost anyone on the planet. If she couldn't help her own grandson and his wife during a mental health crisis, what does that say about her priorities? Or perhaps, what does it say about the validity of your claims? The studio atmosphere was electric with tension. Camera operators adjusted to capture every nuance of Harry's increasingly volatile state. His PR handler, at the edge of the set, made subtle hand gestures, signaling, wrap this up. But neither participant seemed interested in de-escalation. You're twisting everything, Harry said, his voice now trembling with danger. You're taking complex family dynamics and reducing them to tabloid-level drama for your ratings. I'm asking direct questions about public statements you've made, Guthrie shot back, ice-cold precision in her tone. You've earned millions of dollars telling the world how badly you were treated. You've written books, given interviews, produced documentaries. But when someone asks you to be specific about these allegations, suddenly it's too personal to discuss. Harry's laugh was bitter, completely devoid of humor. You know what's rich about this? You sit there in your comfortable studio, having never lived a day under the kind of scrutiny and pressure that comes with being born into that family. And you judge my choices. You judge my wife's mental health struggles. You judge our decision to protect our family. I'm not judging your wife's mental health struggles, Guthrie clarified with lawyerly precision. I'm questioning your decision to monetize them. There's a difference between seeking help and building a media empire around family trauma. The accusation hit Harry like a physical slap. His face flushed deep red, and for a moment it looked like he might stand up and leave. Instead, he gripped the arms of his chair tighter and leaned forward aggressively. Monetize. You think we wanted this? You think we chose to have our private struggles become public entertainment? Actually, yes, I do, Guthrie replied without missing a beat. Because you had options. You could have sought private family mediation. You could have worked within the system to address your concerns. You could have stepped back quietly without the media blitz. Instead, you chose the most public, most lucrative path possible. Harry's composure hung by the thinnest thread. His voice, tight with barely controlled rage, came out sharp. Private mediation work within the system. You clearly don't understand how that system operates. When you're dealing with an institution that values protecting its image more than protecting its people, private conversations are meaningless. So you decided to go nuclear, Guthrie observed coolly. You decided that if you couldn't get what you wanted privately, you'd take your grievances public and make it as damaging as possible to the people who raised you, supported you, and gave you every privilege and opportunity you've ever had. The characterization was devastating in its accuracy. Harry's face shifted through expressions of hurt and fury, privileges and opportunities. Is that what you call growing up in a fishbowl? Is that what you call having every aspect of your life scrutinized and controlled? I call it being born into one of the most privileged positions on earth, Guthrie replied brutally. Billions of people would trade places with you in a heartbeat, mental health struggles and all. But instead of using that privilege responsibly, you've weaponized your family trauma for personal gain. The word weaponized hit Harry like a physical blow. His breathing grew labored, and his hands clenched into fists. We shared our story to help other people struggling with similar issues, to show mental health problems can affect anyone. No, Guthrie said, shaking her head with what looked like genuine disappointment. You shared your story to justify leaving your responsibilities behind and to maintain your lifestyle while doing it. You've built an entire brand around being victims of the very system that gave you everything you have. Harry's laugh was sharp and humorless. Everything we have. We've been cut off financially. Our security was removed. We've been effectively exiled from our own country because of choices you made. You can't burn bridges and then complain about being on the other side of the river. You can't attack your family publicly and act surprised when there are consequences. Guthrie fired back. The back and forth reached a fever pitch. Harry's face was a mask of barely contained fury, his voice close to saying something he'd regret. You know what the real tragedy is here, Harry said, voice dripping with contempt. People like you, who've never lived under this kind of pressure, sitting in judgment of decisions made under impossible circumstances. You reduce everything to simple narratives because complexity doesn't fit your format. The complexity you refer to is the complexity of justifying unjustifiable behavior. Guthrie replied with surgical precision. You've made a career out of playing the victim while benefiting from every advantage your birth gave you. And when people point out that contradiction, you claim they don't understand the complexity. Harry was visibly trembling with rage, his voice dropping to a whisper that somehow felt more menacing than shouting. You have no idea what you're talking about. None. You sit there with your prepared questions and your smug superiority, completely oblivious to the damage you're doing. The damage I'm doing? Guthrie's eyebrows shot up. I'm asking questions, Prince Harry. That's what journalists do. If you can't handle basic accountability for your public statements, perhaps you shouldn't have made them in the first place. The comment was the final straw. Harry's carefully maintained facade shattered, and the raw anger that had been building throughout the interview erupted like a volcano. His face contorted with rage, and when he spoke, his voice was a barely controlled roar that echoed through the studio. Accountability. You want to talk about accountability? Harry shot up from his chair so violently it rolled backwards several feet. How about your accountability for participating in the same toxic media culture that killed my mother? How about your accountability for turning human suffering into entertainment? The sudden movement sent shockwaves through the studio. Crew members froze in place. Cameras continued rolling, and Guthrie herself seemed momentarily taken aback by the explosive transformation of her guest. But her journalistic instincts kicked in immediately, and she remained seated, looking up at the furious prince with something resembling satisfaction. Your mother's death was a tragedy, Guthrie said, maintaining professional calm even as Harry loomed over her, but you can't use that tragedy as a shield against legitimate criticism forever. At some point, you have to take responsibility for your own choices and actions. My own choices? Harry's laugh was wild, unhinged. My choice to protect my wife from the same treatment that killed my mother. My choice to prioritize my family's safety over institutional expectations. Those are the choices you're criticizing. Your choice to profit from family dysfunction, Guthrie shot back, still seated, but leaning forward aggressively. Your choice to air private grievances for public consumption. Your choice to build a brand around victimhood while living a life of extraordinary privilege. Harry began pacing behind his chair like a caged animal, hands gesturing wildly, voice rising near shouting. Profit, brand. You reduce everything to money and marketing because that's all you understand. You can't comprehend that some things are more important than protecting institutions and maintaining facades. What I can't comprehend, Guthrie said, rising from her chair, is how someone with your advantages and opportunities can stand there playing the victim, while millions face real struggles without the luxury of a Netflix deal to help them cope. The Netflix reference hit Harry like a physical blow. His face turned from red to purple, and his voice, when he found it, was barely human in its fury. Netflix deal. You think this is about money? You think we wanted to expose our pain and trauma for the world's entertainment? I think you wanted to maintain your lifestyle while abandoning your responsibilities. Guthrie shot back with devastating precision. I think you wanted to have your cake and eat it, to all the benefits of royal status without any of the obligations that come with it. Harry stopped pacing and turned to face her directly, eyes blazing with an intensity that made several crew members step back involuntarily. Benefits? What benefits? The benefit of having my wife driven to suicidal thoughts by relentless media harassment. The benefit of watching my family choose protecting their image over protecting us. The benefit of being born into wealth and privilege that most people can only dream of. The benefit of having platforms and opportunities you've used to enrich yourselves while claiming to be victims of the very system that created those opportunities. Guthrie countered without hesitation. The contradictions struck Harry with devastating force. His face passed through rage, hurt, and confusion before settling into something resembling pure hatred. His voice, when he finally spoke, was low and venomous. You know what? You're exactly what's wrong with this industry. You take complex human situations and reduce them to soundbites and gotcha moments. You participate in the same destructive media culture you pretend to critique, and you're exactly what's wrong with celebrity culture. Guthrie responded without missing a beat. You want all the attention and sympathy without any scrutiny or accountability. You want to be seen as both a victim and a hero, depending on what serves your narrative at any given moment. Harry's hands were now shaking with rage, and his voice had become a barely controlled shout. Narrative? This isn't a narrative. This is my life. These aren't talking points. This is my family. You sit there with your prepared questions and your smug superiority, completely disconnected from the human cost of your entertainment. I'm disconnected. Guthrie's voice rose to match his intensity. You're the one who chose to make your family drama into global entertainment. You're the one who turned private pain into public profit. Don't blame me for asking the questions your own actions have made necessary. The exchange had reached a crescendo of mutual hostility that seemed to surprise even the participants. Harry was now standing directly in front of Guthrie's chair, his face inches from hers, voice a barely controlled snarl. You want to know the truth, the real truth. Harry's voice shook with emotion. The truth is that people like you will never understand what it's like to choose between protecting your family and meeting other people's expectations. You'll never understand the courage it takes to walk away from everything you've known to save the people you love, and you'll never understand what it's like to face real consequences for your actions without a safety net of inherited wealth and privilege. Guthrie fired back, standing to meet his aggressive posture. You'll never understand what it's like to struggle without the option of monetizing your trauma for millions of dollars. The words hung in the air like a declaration of war. Harry stared at her, chest heaving, hands clenched into fists. The studio was silent, save for the hum of equipment and the barely audible whispers of crew members witnessing something unprecedented. This is exactly why we left, Harry said finally, voice eerily calm in a way that felt more dangerous than his earlier shouting. This is exactly the kind of toxic, destructive behavior we refuse to subject our children to. Congratulations, Savannah. You've just proven every point we've ever made about the media. And you've just proven every point about entitled celebrities who can't handle basic accountability. Guthrie responded with ice-cold precision. You came here to promote your charity work. Remember, instead, you've given us a masterclass in how not to handle legitimate criticism. Harry's laugh was bitter, completely devoid of humor. Legitimate criticism? Is that what you call this character assassination? This deliberate distortion of everything we've said and done? I call it journalism, Guthrie replied flatly. I call it asking the questions that need to be asked when public figures make public statements. If you can't handle that level of scrutiny, perhaps you should reconsider your public profile. The suggestion seemed to break something fundamental in Harry's remaining composure. His face went through a final series of expressions before settling into a mask of cold fury, somehow more frightening than his earlier explosive anger. You know what, Savannah? This conversation is over. Harry's voice was deadly calm, each word precisely enunciated with barely controlled rage. I came here in good faith to discuss important work that actually matters to people's lives. Instead, I've been subjected to a deliberate hit job designed to generate controversy and ratings. He turned toward his security detail at the edge of the set, then looked back at Guthrie with unmistakable contempt. This is exactly why trust in media is at an all-time low. This is exactly why people are turning away from traditional journalism. You've chosen sensationalism over substance, conflict over constructive dialogue. I've chosen accountability over celebrity worship. Guthrie shot back, but Harry was already moving toward the exit, jaw set in determination. Good luck with your ratings, Harry said over his shoulder as he began walking off the set, his security team falling into step beside him. I hope this performance was worth whatever damage you've done to your own credibility. The studio erupted into controlled chaos as Harry made his dramatic exit. Cameras followed his purposeful stride toward the doors. Posture radiating anger and wounded dignity, Guthrie remained standing, watching him go with an expression mixing professional satisfaction and a hint of regret. Prince Harry. Everyone, Guthrie said to the cameras as the studio doors slammed shut behind the departing royal, voice maintaining professional composure despite the unprecedented events. We'll be right back after this break. The red recording lights finally dimmed, and the studio fell into stunned silence that spoke volumes about what had just occurred. Staff members stood frozen, unsure how to process the explosive confrontation they had filmed. The empty chair where Harry had sat seemed to symbolize the wreckage of what began as a simple promotional interview and devolved into one of the most dramatic celebrity meltdowns in television history. In the end, both participants got exactly what they deserved. Harry had proven every criticism about his inability to handle accountability, while Guthrie had demonstrated the ruthless pursuit of controversy over constructive journalism. The real losers were the viewers, who had tuned in, hoping to learn about veterans' issues and instead witnessed the spectacular implosion of two public figures who had forgotten that some battles aren't worth winning